The sport of off-road racing is full of incredible stories, wild characters, legends, and even villains. We cover it all on offroadracer.com, but there's only so much we can put down in an article. Sometimes we have to dig a little deeper, and that means sitting down with some of our industry's most influential characters and hitting record. Welcome to the Off-Road Racer podcast, a Mad Media production, made exclusively for offroadracer.com. Each month, we'll go beyond the dirt into the homes, shops, and lives of the most interesting and game-changing icons of our sport. You'll hear about their history, success, failure, and everything in between as we pull back the curtain and reveal the stories of their lives. I'm your host, Matt Martelli, and this is the Off-Road Racer podcast. I'm Matt Martelli. This is the Off-Road Racer podcast, and I'm here with a longtime good friend of mine, the mighty Ricky Johnson. What's up, Ricky?
It's awesome to be here, Matt. We've been talking about this for a while, and finally we're getting it done. We've got to work together at the Mint 400. We worked together with Steve Barlow and Red Bull.
Yeah.
So we've danced around. We've been dancing together for quite a while.
Had some good times. We scared some people.
Exactly. And what's cool is, right, walking in to the big headquarters here, talking about all the future. So I don't want to go too deep into that, but exciting stuff for you guys. And it's great because between the Mint and the announcement of the new races next year, you're evolving, but you're not. I like the way you're doing it. You're not trying to crush the sport, so to speak, and not being so tied in what you think. You're listening to what everybody has to say to a certain extent, because some people don't know what the hell they're saying.
Well, of course, but that's the great thing about not having millions of dollars to blow is that we can't do that, right?
Exactly. So I'm not worried about going broke if I am.
Right, exactly. No, and too, like, I don't even know if I told you this, but we are bringing short course to the Mint. So
badass.
Yeah, it would be good to have short course back in the track there at Prim.
That's going to be
a while.
That's going to be cool. So we'll get into that after this podcast, because there's a lot of cool things that we're doing. We're going to start a school with Luke, my son, and I. We're going to have 3 Pro 2s, the old Torque 2-seater. We're going to have that. We got Mike Johnson, old Scott Taylor, and Alan Fluger Pro 2, as well as the one that Luke won the Pro 2 championship in as well. So we found that a lot of the guys now, qualifying is so important in deserts down in Mexico, which now we're qualifying for every round.
Yeah, we qualify up in the States as well.
So talking to a lot of the trophy truck spec guys and stuff, they need short course because you got to be on fire right now. And what I like about a Pro 2, it's a light version. It feels like a super, everything's happening at a much quicker pace, like surfing a longboard versus a shortboard. And so I think it's going to be a great program. We found places that we can do it, Glen Helen, TCB Ranch, and stuff like that. So a lot of good things. So I'm stoked. We need short course back at the Mint.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, you're the perfect person to talk to about this because, you are a motocross champion. You saw the evolution of Supercross rise, as part of Mickey Thompson. Mm-hmm. You participated in Mickey Thompson Racing. You participated in outdoor short course racing. So, you really have a unique set of experiences and point of view too. I mean, it's one of the things I like about you is
I don't like giving you my opinion.
Yeah, you're not afraid to offer your opinion. Which I think is good. And I think my guess would be you learned that from motocross, and that there were decisions being made, and they weren't including the racers, and you're like, hey, we'd like to talk to you about the track.
Right. Well, I think I sat down with Jim Baldwin because when I first went from stadium trucks, then short course trucks, then I retired. It wasn't like an official retirement, but I didn't have a ride, so I was done. And then saw Carl Renazetter up at the hot springs in Mammoth, and he says, "Hey, my father-in-law just bought Core. What do you think about this and that?" So I met with Jim and talked about the tracks, and I said, "Who's the biggest star?" And so he wanted to be kind of a prick, which he could be sometimes. He says, "What? I suppose you think it's you?" And I said, "No, it's the track. If the track sucks, everybody sucks. If the track is good, everything is good." And that was right around the time when, remember, Daytona came apart in turn 3, and they had to stop the race because the concrete was, the asphalt was coming up. I said, we have to have great racetracks. And if we have great racetracks that are raceable, passable, stuff like that, it's going to look great. We're going to have people running into each other and doing this and that, but we have to really have good tracks and have rhyme and reason where you put a jump, why you put a jump, how steep is the berm, can you use the outside, is it a slide job, does it set up for a T-bone? So for me, I came at it from a lot of different angles. And what was good is Jim kind of went back on a deal, and I was going to run Jason's truck after he passed away. But then he said, no, but I want you to announce and do the tracks and this and that. So it had me focus on that, and I didn't care about me, but I went out there all the time, and I was shave this jump down. No one's using that part. You do this, do that. And we had some unbelievable racing there. And that was, and I got to give Jim that credit. He was the one that said, I want competition. I don't care. I'm spending a lot of money. I want that competition yellow.
It was interesting because I think at that time it really taught me a really valuable lesson in how to understand how to make tracks raceable.
Yep.
Right. That's the most important thing is like, you can have this cool looking track and all these features, but if people can't race, they can't pass. There aren't multiple lines.
Yep.
There aren't openings and corners. There aren't just different opportunities for them to, race. Like then it turns into like a lot of what short course is right now, which is like follow the leader. It's like,
well, I'll be honest with you, Johnny Greaves, who he and I went head to head with each other and stuff, but he said it best. Crandon is a great track to drive. It's a terrible track to race.
Yep.
It's like when you're by yourself, you can scare the crap out of yourself. You're coming into turn one, on two wheels, and the dirt's right there, and it's off camber and all wicked. Then you got the barn jump, and you're doing all this different stuff. So to go fast and like do qualifying laps, it's really exhilarating, really challenging and stuff like that. But now when you're trying to pass somebody, like literally the roost is so heavy, even with the kind of chintzy mud flaps that we have, and that was kind of my idea back in the day, but we'll get into that later. You come around the outside, when somebody hits you, you feel your car slow down.
Yeah.
Like there's so much roost, it like you feel, oh.
Well, and two, the further you go out into the fluff, it's just, I don't think people that haven't driven, like you see it, and if you're really paying attention, you observe it, but like, unless you've driven and you step out into it and you feel the slowdown of the vehicle, you just sink. It's like, and especially when you're in this mode where you're on pace and you're making moves in your head faster than what the vehicle's doing and trying to set up. And then you make one little mistake and step out and it's like poof, slow motion.
Someone hit the brakes. And the other thing is you can't see. I mean, you come around, if you're offline, if you're slightly to the outside, as I said, even with those mud flaps that they have, it just, you can't see at all. And so when you do that, if you hesitate that throttle a little bit, by the time you get back on the gas, you've lost eight truck lengths. So I was a big advocate. I know this is not what we're going to talk about, but I was a big advocate of making mud flaps so good that there's no roost coming off the back.
Sure.
Make a wall across the back, do like 3 stages if we have to, 2 stages or whatever of mud flaps so that there's no roost. So how much better is that going to be for safer for the drivers? Because getting hit in the head with rocks, at 100 miles an hour is not good. Or breaking fingers on the steering wheel, even though you got the grate and stuff, the stuff's coming in, it's hot. And then also you could race right up behind somebody.
Sure.
If you're faster than them, you can get there. And because now that roost is one of the major factors. So you got to jump in it or jump out. You're playing double dutch.
I think that the input from the driver's perspective is critical, right? Because, a lot of people have never had that experience that are decision makers either in the, as a promoter, as the league, and they don't understand, right? And so I think that was one thing going all the way back to the core days that I was really stoked on, that, that Jim did listen to you and he made changes to the track accordingly, which made the racing super dynamic. So it was funny, being involved with off-road racing as a cinematographer in that era, because my job was to watch, right? Like I was watching everything and observing everything. And it was really interesting because you had the kind of perfect storm of like the evolution of the vehicles, you coming in and changing the tracks, and then Jason Markham really stepping up with the coverage of it and using things like the bat cam that really captured how dynamic the racing was. in film, right, in television, and it was exciting, man. I remember seeing the first Chula Vista, and then the second Chula Vista, and seeing the ski jump and all that kind of stuff, and being like, dude, it's a video game,
Right.
and that's what it should be, because like what those vehicles with the right drivers are capable of is absolutely incredible. There's nothing like it in this world. We talk about all these different forms of racing and how cool Indy is and Formula One, all that stuff. That's all cool. But unless you've been to Crandon and you've seen Turn 1, or you've been to Chula Vista and you've seen a ski jump and, all the different components of the best of each track, like, you don't really know how wild and dynamic these vehicles are. And then there's the contact part. That was the other part that I loved. It's like, you have, in pretty much every form of racing, everybody's getting penalized, right, for these little light rubs. Whereas in short course racing, it's like,
It's a necessity.
Unless you cream somebody, you know what I mean? You're not, it's part of it.
Well, let me tell you a cool story about Jim Baldwin. So when he hired me, he left. Like, he went on his sailboat down in the Caribbean or somewhere, wherever, I don't know where it was. And so we laid out, and he gave me a budget, and he said, this is what I want, and here's what we're going to do. And it's up at the Lucerne Valley Fairgrounds.
Yep.
So if you remember, if anyone was there, we had the stuff in the fairgrounds, but we went way out in the field across the way. And there was
I remember the silt there.
Right. And there was a berm that we ended up building that was probably 25, 30 feet tall.
Yep.
So I built it to budget and to spec with what we had. And Jim comes back and gets there and goes up in the stands. He's looking at it, and he starts knocking down some wine. He calls me and starts MFing me on the phone, which I'm not a big fan of that, regardless if I work for you or not. He says, I want you effing up here at 10 o'clock tomorrow. We're going over this is bullshit, blah, blah, blah. And so I'm like, I rolled in there. I was there at 7 o'clock. I had my contract in my hand because I was going to tell him to stuff it up his ass. I was like livid because he called me at dinner and is cussing at me, and I'm not on the speaker, but in front of my family. And so I'm like, how dare you? You know what I mean? And so I go there and I knock on his thing. And he's like, I told you to be here at 10. I said, well, when someone starts MFing me on the thing, I'm here now. I'll be out in a minute. So he gets out. He's like, so I said, here's my contract. If you don't like what I'm doing, he's like, you got to understand this is this. I said, you told me a budget. I don't care about the budget. I said, okay. And he says, why aren't we in that field? I go, because some Asian person owns it and we can't get in touch with them. Build it. I'm like, okay. So I go down to the track builder, and literally we probably spent $90,000 to build that track. Remember, the berms were massive. And he goes, I want them bigger. I'm like, okay. So I went to the track builders at the time, and I'm like, double everything. Right. Go get loaders, go get dirt movers, and then start skimming dirt to make us that giant berm out there. I love the balls of the guy. No permit to go out there, no permission to use the guy's property, and he just did it.
Yeah.
I mean, think about how he pulled it off in one of his housing tracks in Chula Vista.
Yeah.
And so that division is not being built right now. I'm going to put an off-road track there.
It was awesome.
You're going through people residential housing thing, and then all of a sudden, boom. Because I thought that first Chula Vista track was the best.
I liked it. I liked the elevation changes.
Had the Land Rush star, and it had everything.
But I like the other one better because it was almost opposite. Because that one, you guys were running up top and it dropped down.
Yeah.
Because I remember being an idiot and going like, they're going to come down this, and they're going to be like right here. This will be a great place to film. Well, what I didn't take into account was that because there was no barricade at the top, nobody was going to stay in that line.
Right.
So like, Welchel damn near flew over me, right?
Right.
So, like, after almost dying on that one, I wasn't super stoked on that one.
Yeah, love the move.
But then, that one was temporary, and they got to the other Chula Vista one. The other Chula Vista one was like, to me, from a visual perspective, that was the track.
Well, and that I will give credit to Jim Baldwin. It's the same thing with Vegas at Prim, where you're going to run that.
Yeah.
So Jim said, I can't see everything.
Yeah.
He says, so what I want, so if you're looking at the track, I want the line closest to me, the start-finish line at this line. I want the second one at this height. I want, as you come out of that corner, I want it at this height, and I want the one on the back at this height. And I'm like, is genius because you're not seeing this. You're seeing this and this and this and so on. And so I'm like, I'll give it to you, Jim. And so then from there, he let me work on the obstacles and the approach of the jumps and pitching them. So, and that Prim track, great racing, great racing. And so yeah, a lot of it was a fun time. And so for me, when I'm talking to you and Killian about my opinions, it's your fortune or misfortune, whatever it might be. But what I don't want to do is sit around in the back and then tell you 3 years down the road, what? I thought of that 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Because as I said, my paycheck doesn't change. I just want to see better racing.
Well, but that's the thing I really respect about you is your passion, right? Like you're like the guy who, you know, is going to be locked out of the gate. And you're going to yell through the gate. You're doing it wrong, right? Yeah. And that's a good thing, you know, because again, it's perspective. It's like, you know, when you're going through these evolutions, and especially again going back to your career, you know, and the experience that you've had in motocross, supercross, like just seeing all this evolution, you know, Mickey Thompson era, et cetera, and going like, okay, you know, somebody builds a track now and they think they're, oh man, I'm a genius. And you're like, actually, that's a terrible track. Nobody's going to be able to pass because you don't understand the fundamentals of off-road racing.
Right.
So I think
we saw that, and I don't mean to cast stones, but we saw that in the Lucas tracks.
Yeah.
You
well,
know?
And the other problem was that maintenance, right? So as tracks don't get maintained, the lanes close and it comes back to one lane, which turns into follow the leader.
Well, and the ridiculous amount of money that Jim spent so that track was like that. And, and another thing that he did is he tilled it this deep all week and watered it and watered it and watered it. So you had the Pro Light. They took a blade and they took this much dirt off. Now you're back down to wet dirt.
Yeah.
Then before Pro 2, another level of dirt, another level of dirt. It's building up that berm on the outside, but we're also getting down to where, so now they go out and they water it and you can't hold on to the track and stuff like that. But we were racy from green flag to checkered flag with those, but it's not an economical way of doing it. And that's the thing though. But Jim's like, I like it and I'm doing it this way. And so we all got to enjoy his party.
Yeah, no, it was a huge influence on us, on off-road culture in general. And like now, you know, not being a extremely wealthy guy at this point in my life, we look at how do we do that sustainably? Because I believe in the value of short course and it being connected to desert racing, right? And those two things, those two disciplines leveraging off of each other. Because again, you're the illustration of that. You are the guy who, you know, had success short course racing and then has been able to come, you know, to take that and apply it for desert racing. I mean, what are you guys on? You're like 9 victories in a row for
10. With Gus.
10. Yeah, which is incredible, right?
Well, I mean, I've had a very fortunate. I've been very blessed. The thing that I think I'm most blessed with is that I've had unbelievable competition. When you have that competition, you dread it. I mean, I dreaded a kid named Brian Antonacci when I was 9, Scott Burnworth when I was 12, Rick Mackey and Mike Tripes when I turned pro locally. Then, you know, it goes down the line. Johnny O'Mara, David Bailey, all the guys that Brock Glover that I raced with and Jeff Ward in motocross. And then I get into stadium trucks and I had Rod Millen and Ivan Stewart and Walker Evans and Jeff Ward again and Rob McCachran. And then I get into short course. Now I have Scott Taylor. So I've had to attack giants the whole time. And when you're doing that, you're scared. You're like, oh, man, this guy's a man. He's done this before and I'm a kid trying it. But at the end of the day, that's why I still race. I love that being afraid. You know, like people say, I'm afraid at every starting line. I'm not afraid to die and I'm not afraid to get hurt. That's not the thing. I'm afraid to fail. I'm afraid to let everybody down. Like Villadosla, I don't want to let Gus down, number one. He's my teammate. I want to give him a truck that's solid. In 1,000, I got Mike Johnson, Mike Coleman, and Gus. I want to make sure that I give him a truck with brakes, fenders on it. Sometimes I don't always do that, but everything working. And then also all those red shirts, everybody throughout the pits and throughout Baja, I want them to go, you know, I want them to cheer and be happy that we're all part of the same team, not Rick destroyed another truck.
Yeah.
So that that has been a blessing for me to keep doing that because it allows me to, I hate to say it, allows me to keep being a kid.
Well, what's that feel like for you? I mean, you go through this incredible career and, and now you finally arrive at a point. I mean, you've had rides before that were pretty rad, right?
Yep.
But you arrive at a point where it's like the best of the best, right? And like also too, like I think the Vidolsas, they're at a point where, where finances and maturity, right?
Yep.
Have kind of met each other, and they're like, we know how to do this. We've won the 1,000 multiple times. We've won championships. Like this isn't, a bunch of pressure and everybody freaking out. I just did a podcast with Tavo, and one of the things that I was really impressed by is, how he's gone from, psycho driving Tavo
Checkers or wreckers, yeah.
to listen, we're gonna be there. We're gonna be in the top 3 at the end. And if we have the opportunity, we're going to get it, right? And that's more like what Rob McCachran does, right? So what's it like for you, to now continue to have this or have this particular opportunity after such a long career?
Well, it's awesome. For one is Gus and I met each other. I had my dad in 1994, I think it was. Mm-hmm. I was racing for McPherson, or 95. I'm driving from San Felipe up through Laguna Salada, and there's that big strip where you cross it, and there's nothing there. And I see this pre-runner pulled over to the side, and I go to pull over. My dad's like, "What are you doing?" That could be a Bandito. I'm like, it's a guy with a nice pre-runner, and he's parked. I mean, he's got to walk like 40 miles that way or 20 miles this way. So let me see. So I pull over, and I see this the Dodge Ram thing or whatever it is, the like Tahoe, whatever they're called,
right?
And Walker Evans painted, but it's red in the front and not blue, and with the rainbow up the side. And I go, "Hey, you okay?" And he says, "Hey, could you give me a ride to Mexicali?" And I go, "Sure, hop in." I get my dad in the back. My dad's thinking, "What are you doing? We're gonna get shot or something." I'm not worried about it. So we start talking, and it's Gus. I said, "So what do you do?" We have a company called Kenmex and Kenworth Trucks and this and that. So we talk. I drop him off, and I would see him. "Hey, Gus. Hey, Rick." Just casually. I didn't really know what he did. I thought he was just maybe some guy that bought a pre-runner from Walker. I didn't know. Then I'm over with my wife Steph, and we fly to Charles de Gaulle into France. And you fly overnight, and so you have to go check your bags before you go somewhere. And I'm sitting there, I'm looking at this guy, and I go, "Gus?" Because he's a Mexican guy, and I'm thinking, what's the Mexican doing? What's the Mexican doing in Paris? And he goes, "Rick," and he's thinking, what's this white trash desert truck racer doing in France? And I said, "What are you doing here?" He says, "Oh, my daughter Fernanda's going to culinary school and this and that. I'm coming this year." I'm like, "Awesome. I'm here to do some old retirement motocross race thing or whatever." And so we became friends from that point on. And we'd always see each other, always, give each other a hug and, "Hey, if you need anything, blah, blah, blah," always really good. And then a couple of years ago, he called me and said, "I want to go after the championship in Legends, and you're old enough," because I drove with Robbie Pierce, God rest his soul, and we won in the fastball truck. So we got with Gus, and working with Javi and Steve and Tavo and Lichetto and Dave Clark and everybody. I've really enjoyed it, because I've had the opportunity to work with Team Honda, Team Yamaha, Team Chevrolet, all the different stuff. I've been with some great teams, including Team C with Larry Connor, and these guys are here to win, and they're willing to put everything on the line. And as you said, where we're at right now is the shop has really done a good job making those trucks work really well. Anything can happen. Any oil line can break or a fitting can break, but we can race it hard. And now with Gus and I, we're in the top 5. And legitimately, not just a gimme because everybody crashed, whatever. We qualified 8th at San Felipe. We were in the top 5, and we ended up 5th overall. So Gus is doing his job. I'm doing my job, but we're still looking for ways to be better. So to answer your question, to be with a team like that, where they say, "We want you to give us 100%, we're going to give you 100%," because it's not always that way. Sometimes the team is above the driver, sometimes the driver is above the team, or vice versa. But with them, Gus and I have a good understanding, because at first it was like, well, typically like the owner's like, I want to start because of this or that. And I'm like, well, I've been doing this and I think I can qualify. I got a good pace qualifying. So we have a good system now.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting too, especially because you played such an integral role with developing this platform, right?
Yeah.
For sure, this is Mason's platform. For sure, Larry Connor funded it.
Yep.
But you had a lot of input in this, and in particular, like you and I had a conversation, and you called me, and you're like, you need to come ride in this thing, because we were talking about the difference between a Pro 4 and what this new platform of 4-wheel drive trophy truck is, and it was, the ride was spectacular,
right?
And it's like one of those things where, like, I always want to give credit to people who have given their input to critical moments, right? Because there's more. It's more than one person that makes a meal. That's my stupid analogy of, like, you get the plate of food and you're like, this is amazing. Well, it's a combination of things that
someone fed the cow, someone grew the vegetables.
It's the whole process, right? And that, to me, it's like, now, okay, cool. It's super obvious. The Mason platform is pretty figured out,
Well, but let's go back. Larry Connor took it where it needed to go. But the guys from MC Painting, who have supported Neil all the way, Neil had this idea. They said, we'll fund it. And if you sell it, great. We want to help you.
Yeah.
So those guys were the ones that put up the money to build the first all-wheel drive. And then Larry drove it and said, okay, I want to build number 2. So we have 2 of them back to back, and I will buy this from MC Painting. And so then that's how that whole thing came together. So credit needs to go where credit's due.
Sure.
And those guys have supported Neil with buying multiple spec trucks and also the original funding behind the all-wheel drive. But it was funny. I took, because Neil was having me give rides to everybody because he wanted to get that out there. And Andy McMillan said, this is a perfect storm. You got Neil Mason and Robert Mason, who are the most smartest guys, I think, ingenuity-wise,
Sure.
coming up with new stuff. And you got Larry Connor's money, and you got your testing background. It's a perfect deal. And so I enjoyed doing it. Larry was okay with bankrolling it, and Neil. We had so many tests where we went out there and went 2 miles and something would break.
Yeah.
And then something would break. Then something would break. So these are the things that people don't realize. No. They're like, oh, they don't last. I mean, the pace that we're at, and I'm going to say the pace that the top 5 guys are at, is like a Pro 2 short course race. Yeah. I mean, it is so much faster than it was 4 years ago.
I mean, we broke the day that we went out testing, and I remember where we broke, and going over this rise on actually the dirt road. And I remember just thinking, like, trying to do the math equation in my head about the weight of the truck, the stress of that's putting on the drivetrain. And, like, I just couldn't even fathom it, right? Like, understanding what that is in a lighter truck, in a Pro 4, and then, scaling it up to a 7,000 pound vehicle. I'm like, I don't know how this works, but
now with 1,000 horsepower and 800 foot-pounds of torque,
right,
and 40-inch tires.
Yeah,
it's pretty mind-blowing. And I'll be honest with you, with myself, some days you're moving along, because in certain places you can get up to about 135, 140. Occasionally over a little bit more than that, like on the start at how we used to do the start in the 500 down in Sonata, but. Sometimes I think, wow, this is the same species of animal that thought of the horse and buggy.
Right.
It's the same, and that we're talking just 200 years separation.
Yeah.
And now we're doing this, and I'm like, I can't believe that this thing does this, because when you take people for a ride, they're like, oh, what the hell?
Yeah.
It just keeps going.
I mean, I've been super fortunate that I've ridden with you. I've ridden with David Higgins. I've ridden with, lots of good drivers in different 4-wheel drive vehicles. And, like, that was the only thing I could wrap my head around, is I'm like, this is like a Pro 4 and a rally car got together and had a right. high horsepower baby
right,
with more travel. Right.
Yep.
And it's just incredible. And it's incredible that, it wasn't some huge factory with hundreds of millions of dollars figuring this out. It was two brothers from, Lake Elsinore who don't even have an engineering background, really. I mean, their dad does, but it's not like they had all this schooling on how to make this, and it was obvious that they would go in this direction. When I met them early on, they were making, UTVs.
Right. That's how it started. Rebuild rhinos and then doing that. Then built their own truck. And then it was too light in the back. And so they went back and forth.
Attention Off-Road Nation. The Unlimited Off-Road Racing Championship comes roaring through Parker, Vegas, and Barstow in 2024. It's three of the most prestigious and competitive off-road races in the sport. It all starts with the return of the Parker 400 in beautiful Arizona, January 10th through the 14th. Then it's the biggest, baddest, most grueling off-road race on the planet. The BF Goodrich Tires Mint 400 comes roaring back into Sin City, Las Vegas, March 6th through the 10th. And finally, the climactic conclusion of the Unlimited Off-Road Racing Championship, the California 300, returns to Barstow, October 2nd through the 6th. Visit unlimitedoffroadracing.com for complete details. The 2024 Unlimited Off-Road Racing Championship is here.
But, you go back to when it was tried before, when I was racing for McPherson, started as Steve Kelly's Class 4, four-wheel drive. Then they put Class 4 in two-wheel drive and four-wheel drive together. I raced with Jerry McDonald, and we raced in Class 8. Now, we had a factory program. Theirs was what they called truck and bus. It wasn't Chevrolet factory racing, but it was factory, but truck and bus was the engineering side. So when we did testing there, and I learned a ton, and that's why I think it helped Neil and I communicate, because we would go out there and we would test percentage of front-wheel drive. I'm just throwing out round numbers. 80% front-wheel drive, 50-50, 70-30, whatever the case may be, and what worked the best. And I'm like, I like this in sand washes. I like this in the bumps. I like this on this kind of turn, so I could change it back and forth. We never raced with that, but being able to test and going, this is what that feels like, I think gave me an advantage over a lot of the other guys that were coming, because your timing and your rhythm and your cadence of a two-wheel drive versus a four-wheel drive, one's like salsa and then the other one's punk rock.
Yeah.
It steps up.
It's massively different. Like the driving technique of driving a two-wheel drive truck and a four-wheel drive truck is it's completely different.
Yeah. But, and Neil and I both said is that if you're not driving a two-wheel drive on the edge, then what you're going to do is you're just going to get comfortable with the all-wheel drive. Because when you go from 80% to 90% in the all-wheel drive, it becomes a violent world inside, because with that much horsepower, and if you're overcorrecting, the wheels are pointing this way and that way, you have to learn to dance with the big girl. And a lot of guys, I don't think, get it. I think they would be faster in two-wheel drive.
Yeah, it's interesting too. You have this unique perspective because of your time in Pro 2 and Pro 4. And then, racing two-wheel drive and four-wheel drive trophy trucks.
Yeah. So if you look, the top 12 qualifiers and then the top 10 finishers or top 8 finishers or something like that were all Masons. And so I'm excited for Rob and Jimco. I think that's a cool deal.
Yeah.
I think, when I talked to Robbie about that and I talked to Barry, they feel really good about it. And I think that a traditional motor up front could potentially be a very, very strong, because it's got the portals. It's got a lot of the good parts that Mason sort of brought to an all-wheel drive truck. But it's a little bit more traditional. Rob was really happy with it. Unfortunately, something was wrong with it. It didn't quite go right for him down at the 500, but they'll figure it out, and that'll be another four-wheel drive in the field.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a couple other people that are doing different, interesting things. We'll see if it pans out. Yeah. But, let's go back.
All right. Go back.
Let's go back, because I want people to understand how Ricky Johnson was made, how he was created, right?
Yep.
Not literally, but you started on bikes at a very young age.
3.
Yeah.
Yep.
So talk about that, how that was growing up. In that environment and the expectations, right?
So before I was born and a couple months while I was doing that, my dad was race go-karts, and my dad always had Harleys and Indians. He was in the Navy. My mom and dad met in Corpus Christi, Texas.
And this is here in Southern California.
Yeah, so I was born in Southern California, but they met in Corpus Christi. Then they moved to Detroit. My dad was, after he got out of the Navy, was a house painter, and then he moved out west, and I was born in California. And then one day at a Sears, they had this little Rupp 3-horse or 1.5 horse mini bike. And I was climbing on it at 3 years old, and my dad just got it for me. And that's the cool thing about my dad. He we got cool stuff for Christmas, but if the moment struck him, like when I got my little mini Stingray or my mini bike, it was just because it was time. And so when I got that, I sound like Ricky Bobby, but I found my purpose. I just want to go fast, and I just loved it. And I wasn't like immediately fast, but I was always ready to go. I wanted to be on the bike all the time. But they never had to tell me you need to go ride. It was just I'm in it all the time. And so from there, we had someone move into the neighborhood that raced and said, "Hey, we'll take you to a race." I was 7. I did a couple TT races, got my ass kicked. I've told a story about racing my shadow for last place, and I did beat my shadow because I passed the light right at the right time. But from there, that was the thing that we did. We went racing every weekend, and then raced down to Speedway 117, down in Chula Vista.
Yeah,
and so very close to the the old gravel pit or the quarry in Chula Vista. Raced there on Wednesday nights, and so from there it was just my thing. I turned expert when I was 9 years old. Raced mini bikes because we didn't have a bunch of money, couldn't do the circuit. Brock Glover let me borrow a 125 when I was 12. I was really small, but I liked it. And so my dad says, "I can't afford mini bikes and that. So what do you want to do?" I said, "Screw the mini bikes. I want to race this." So in 3 months, I turned pro when I was 13, and never looked back. I couldn't race the national level because you had to be 16. But so I was racing in Southern California, which was the most fierce competition in the world at that time. I mean, gates there were 2 gates so there was 80, like there was like 80 juniors and over 40 intermediates and like 30 pros and 5 guys could win. So growing up in Southern California, I had good tracks, I had great competition, and I had parents that were committed to what I did. So my mom made sure that she patched me up and had us meals, and my dad was my mechanic and painted my helmets. And so it was my way to express myself, because to be, dead brutally honest, I was so bad at school. It was humiliating. I struggled with this for a long time, but I don't now. I'm a 60-year-old man, and I'm okay with who I am, and that I don't see the world in words. I see it in pictures.
Sure.
So when somebody tells me, they say things, I don't see the word. Like, a guy walks into a bar, I picture the bar, the Miller sign, the smoke, the beer sitting on there. I see all of that. And when I go to read, when I have to put a picture to every word I read, I have to translate it back and forth. It slows me way down. And so same thing when I go to spell, I struggled really bad. And so I was always in the stupid class and this and that. I wasn't the biggest guy. I wasn't the best looking guy. I wasn't the best dancer. I was a good dancer, not the best. But I was the fast kid. So I found something that I could identify with, and people couldn't make fun of me. Because my friends protected me, but they know when you're in the dumb class.
What was that like when there had to have been a point where like you went from being like, cool, this is cool, I'm having a good time, it's amateur, blah, 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 blah. But was there a point where you realized like, oh shit, I'm good at this?
I was young. I knew what I wanted to do from the get-go. And in 3rd grade, I wrote this report, and they don't even have them anymore, that I was going to be a factory CZ rider. When I say I wrote a report, it was like, "Hi, I'm Rick Johnson. I love CZs. I want to race for the factory." Boom. That was my report.
Right.
All misspelled words, but spelled CZ right. So I could understand that.
Right. It was important.
I might have got the Z wrong, but I remember going, "This is what I want to do." And I got to give credit where it belongs. And a lot of that is Bruce Brown.
Sure.
When I saw on Any Sunday, I'm like, that's what I want to do.
Yeah, it's funny because like I think that's one of the things like I can't stress enough, even now in this modern era of like social media, of how much film has an impact. Because same, like that movie for me was like, this is incredible. And at the time I saw that movie, I lived in Michigan, so I'm like, hey, all these guys hang out in California, and
Guess where I'm going?
Yeah, like, well, I ended up here, fortunately. But it's interesting for you to cite that film in particular, and I think we need more of that type of, not just short form, like, hey, I saw a dude doing a backflip on Instagram, but just the storytelling that Bruce did, and it brought you into this world, and especially you had to go into a theater to watch it, so you're like kind of shutting out all the bullshit. You're like, you're there with McQueen going, all right, let's go. You know what I mean?
Well, I remember going, and we had to go from El Cajon up on El Cajon Boulevard, basically above San Diego. And El Cajon Boulevard is really long. It goes from San Diego all the way out there. Anyhow, the Evel Knievel movie came out at the same time. And so I was like, we're going to see the Evel Knievel movie. And it was 2 theaters back when it was just 2. And my dad's going, no, we're going to see on any Sunday. And I was so pissed because I was thinking on any Sunday was like The Sound of Music. You know what I mean? It
sounds like it's a terrible name, right? On any Sunday. Are we going to church?
Oh, well, and so I'm there, and I didn't take the time to look at the poster, but I'm just acting like a little prick. I'm just sitting there, all upset. You want anything to drink? No, because I see people going to the Evel Knievel movie, and I'll never forget. So we go in there, and I'm sitting there I'm pouting, and and it starts off, and it's got the fat guy that starts the bike, and then burp, he takes off, and I'm like, what the hell's going on? Fat guy riding a GT60 through the woods, then all of a sudden, boom, and it goes to the kids on mini bikes, and I still get goosebumps right now. Yeah. And I'm like, I literally stood with my head on the chair in front of me, just like mouth breathing the whole time, and that movie changed me. I mean, it changed for a lot of people, and it changed the industry. I mean, look what motorcycling did after that, and look what Endless Summer did for surfing too.
Yeah,
as well. Even though the Gidget stuff and blah blah blah, but to be a real surfer, when Endless Summer came out, that's changed it.
That's what I really loved about his films. Is that was when filmmakers and Bruce Brown in particular, and then later on Dana. They were presenters of culture.
Yep.
They were like, hey, it reminded me of the same way storytelling was done for Nat Geo, right? Or, Jacques Cousteau. It's like, we're going to take you into this world, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, okay, I'm in. And what was cool about On Any Sunday is it was this world that was accessible. And especially, I ended up in El Cajon. Mm-hmm. In 84, 83, somewhere around then. And it was, you remember that era. It was like, it was the glory days. It was like people were handing their neighbor kids motorcycles. They're like, here, kid, here's a motorcycle.
Yeah.
There's not like, it's mine. Who's nobody asked. It was just like, just go play on it. Go have a good time. And that had that's why I'm here today,
Well, and Bruce, I mean, if you think back how he filmed a lot of it on 8mm with no sound.
Yeah.
Because if you listen to it, it's all narrated, and it's got a couple words from Gene Romero saying, I got to win. If I don't win, I dig carnations. The different things that he quotes. You hear Steve McQueen say like 4 words at the Elsinore Grand Prix. You have Malcolm Smith a couple words. But the rest of it was Bruce telling the story, and Bruce was so good at it. And also his son Dana, when he came out with Mouse and Scotty Waugh with Dust to Glory, followed the same thing. There's that, wow, they captivate you. You know why? Because you're telling a story and you're making guys heroes. You're not giving them a chance to be even human.
Sure.
They had Mouse so they're going, I was in 3rd overall. They made fun of that and they elaborated on that. But when you don't give a guy a chance to talk and you're just talking how great he is, like Malcolm Smith, all those guys, Gene Romero or Dave Aldana, all the different stuff. I just idolize them because Bruce made it so good. And think about it, once again, 8mm camera.
Yeah, it reminded me of two of like what NFL Films did for the NFL.
Yes.
Where, they took, somebody who you really didn't know who that guy was wearing that jersey, and they made him into heroes, Well,
the Winter Classics too.
Yeah.
When they do that, my wife and I got hooked on that. You become a hockey fan. You see what's going on. You see the behind the scenes. You feel like you know these guys because you hear the coach screaming at them, and you hear them see them getting in fights and doing all different stuff. So it really lets you see behind the scenes, and that's what Bruce did with On Any Sunday, and that's what made me want to be it. So this is a long answer to your question. I was a kid, and I had the feeling I'm not going to be denied. This is what I'm going to do.
So was there a point? So then, okay, cool. You're having success, and then what was your first factory ride?
First factory ride I got support from Yamaha when I was 13. And so I won the 100 national in the intermediate class, and I turned pro. And so I was running with the pro guys all the time. I only lost one 100cc race, and that's to a guy named Greg Toyama, who was, I think, 23 years old. And so then they put me on a 125, and then to make money to get my truck, I would race 125, 250, and 500, all three in one day, so I could make more money. So I could walk away sometimes with $500 on a Wednesday night. Start rat holing that. Next thing you know, when you're 15, you're buying your first truck. So I had what they called a pro support ride when I was 16, and I traveled the nationals. I was able to win the last national and rookie of the year and top privateer. And then 82 was still kind of a pro support ride. Then 83 was a full works ride. And then I was one of the factory guys there. Then I rode 3 years with Yamaha, 83, 84, 85, and then went to Honda, and then 86 through 91.
So then you make this transition afterwards where it's like, cool, you're doing well, you're moving up the ranks, right? But then what was that like when you got into, the big leagues, right? Of like, okay, now there's all these expectations, right? You're not just a dude who showed up and, well, we'll see how he does. Now it's like, hey, there's a full works bike, there's a team behind you, like you're expected to go out there and beat all the top guys in the top class.
Well, when I was in 125s, because they used to have 125, 250, and 500. So my first year in 81, I was a 125 guy. And I got second. Mark Barnett was so much better than everybody that year. His bike was phenomenal, but Mark was so fast and in such unbelievable shape. So the first time I got on the podium, I got second place to him in Texas, really hot that day. We're down in Waco, Texas, and I think it's in June. So it was really, really hot. So we were running 45-minute motos back then. So when I came off the track in the second moto, I got second, and you had to take your bike through the pits and put it in impound so they could check it to see if it was, check the weight and all the different stuff. And if there's any protest, that they could hold the bike. I come into impound, I throw my bike, and I'm ripping clothes off. I'm grabbing people that are drinking Cokes. I don't care. I'm just dumping it on me. I'm on fire. I'm going to die. And I'll never forget, I looked over, and Mark Barnett took the time to set his goggles on top of his head, still had his Jofa on his mouth, and he's walking casually with his gloves still on. And I'm thinking, I'm never going to be that strong. What am I going to do? I mean, I just kicked everyone's butt, but he destroyed me, and he's such a level above. And then I won a race. He got hurt, and I won a race at the last race of the year. And then I won the opening round in 250, and then I almost won the championship, but then got hurt and back and forth. So you have these plateaus. I think everybody does, and you think this is as good as I'm ever going to get. And I even thought that, after in the intermediate class, the local pro class. And so you fear because you grow up knowing guys that never made it out of the amateur class. And I never wanted to be that. I always wanted to try to be the best. And so when I realized I can, but I have to start taking from everybody, something from Brock Glover, something from Bob Hanna, something from Mark Barnett, Mike Bell, all my idols, I got to take what works for me to make me better than them. And then you just have to accept the pressure that your job is there to win. And that's when it becomes a different place when you're at the top, when you're going, there's nobody better than the guys I'm racing with. That's sometimes a hard thing to break through.
Yeah, 100%. But then you win your first championship. What was that like?
So let's back up 2 years. In 1982, had a 20-point lead. All I had to do was get to fifth place. Stupid, 18 years old. I'm going to show the world. I'm going to win. I go out, jump past this Kenny Keelan on a Honda. I land. I break my front wheel. I cartwheel. I push the bike half a lap. I get there. They change the wheel. I make it back to like something like 22nd or 21st or something. They only played points to the top 20. Now the next race, Donnie Hansen, Brock Glover's in first. I'm in second. Donnie Hansen's in third. All he has to do is finish there, and he beats me by 2 points. So 45-minute moto, I kept stopping in the corner, like cussing at him, and he's just like, nope, I'm not doing it. And so I cried for 45 minutes. And so when I lost that championship, it really taught me how to do that. Then 83, dislocated hip, really, really tough season. Broke my collarbone in January, dislocated my hip in June. They said I was going to be done, but I was able to come back. That's when I met my best friend, John Alvarez. He got me back in good shape and all that stuff. Came back in 84, won my first championship. What was so special about that was that I started working with a guy named Cliff Lett, who you might know from Associated Race Cars.
Yep.
So Cliff helped me from when I was really young. We raced against each other at Saddleback when I was like 13 and 14. Then he put me on one of his own bikes, and then he went to work for Yamaha, and then I wanted him as my mechanic because he was like my big brother, and he was so good. I mean, such a great mechanic, such a great tuner, and all that. And so we won the first championship together, and it meant the world to me. But then what happened after that was in 85, we could have made some more developments on the bike, and we didn't. And when they didn't do that, I said I want to go somewhere else, and that's when I went to Honda.
Yeah. So you move over to Honda, and again, at that era, that was probably the best move you could have made because Honda had really, decided to get behind motocross in a way that, Cowie and Yamaha were doing it too.
Right.
But I also remember that era. It was like the Honda team was like, it seemed like a new level, right?
Well, Honda racing in general, like if you took, they decided to come into flat track, which Harley has dominated forever.
Yeah.
They took Gene Romero, remember?
Yeah.
Love Carnations. They had Gene managing that. Then they bring in Ricky Graham, Bubba Schobert, and so on, and then they're so dominant through the 80s.
Yeah.
And then they had Dave Arnold, who was Marty Smith's mechanic, and then they bring Roger DeCoster. So you had that duo.
Yeah.
And the thing with Honda was they did everything right. Yeah. And they from the cranks to the suspension, the Showa guys were just unbelievable. And so they had I don't know how expensive it was, but a complete works bike, and 85 was the last year they could run it. So they let me test that before I went. And people were like, oh, you got the bait and switch. No, because when I rode the bike, I realized shocks and forks aren't going to change, even though this thing has like this low tank and this electronic fuel pump and works motor and all this stuff. I'm going to get a lot of the parts that I need. And so once I realized how hard they worked, that's when it was a good move for me. Because I said, now it's up to me. And my friend, I'll never forget, my friend James Cloud calls me and goes, all right, dude, you got no excuse now. If you get your ass kicked,
right,
we can't defend you anymore.
No.
Because when you're on the number one bike, you have to win.
But it was also an interesting time too because, it seemed, and maybe I'm getting too nostalgic, but it seemed like the worship of bike racers was like at an all-time high, right? Desert, same thing. It was like, people were, I remember being a kid in that era and everybody's like, well, who's the guy you want to be like? Well, yeah, Ivan Stewart, but Danny Hamill too, right? Like same thing with moto is like we all, and I don't know, it just was a magic time, the 80s, we're going to get into the Bad Boy Club and that, logo being, basically derived from a photo of you, the personification of who you were and what it was at that point to be, a stud athlete out of Southern California. It's like, this is like, it was like being a rock star, but better because you didn't have like a performance here and there. You had to perform all the time. So there was a level of athletics that I think that at that time everybody recognized and went, man, you're grinding. I mean, it's one of the things that I tell people this day about, both the Supercross and the motocross athletes is how just brutal and taxing that is on your body. I'd rather be an MMA fighter than a Supercross racer.
It depends on who you're fighting.
Yeah.
So on that, so for me, and I said this about Alpine Stars the other day, and I feel it was kind of how I wanted to live my career, is where function and fashion come together. Because there was a lot of very functional guys before me that were unbelievable trainers and fast racers and stuff like that. And then there was Bob Hanna, who did all of that, but was very flamboyant, but very arrogant and sometimes very abrasive.
Sure.
And so what I wanted to be was, of course I wanted to be cool. Who doesn't? I was a young guy. I liked girls and wanted to, so I did what I thought was cool with my hair. Don't have it anymore, but so I enjoyed it while I had it. But I also wanted to be feared and respected on the track too. And the only way you're going to do that is by being in shape, by putting the grind in and getting it done. So they portrayed me as the bad boy and hanging out. And they would do this. They'd have a picture of me next to somebody's Testarossa with a surfboard and a chick talking to me. And here's Jeff Ward with his bicycle and his thing, So they made it out like I just party and surf and hang out. And Wardy's this workaholic, but we always seem to be together at the end of the race.
But it looked like you were the one having all the fun.
Exactly. Then I did hear some of the guys from the 90s go, see, we were party guys because we wanted to be like you. I'm like, well, do you realize I wasn't fading the last 10 minutes of the race? So I was working hard, but but they never talked about it. I didn't care.
Well, I think that's a very important point because I think that, that's where a lot of motorsports competitors and just competitors now, they don't understand like the humanization part of it, right? Like I would kind of compare you to like the Dale Earnhardt, right? Where like you were exhibiting humanity. You were acting like a human, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like a lot of the guys, and especially a lot of the guys today, are very robotic. They're like, I want to thank my sponsors. I'm not going to swear. I'm not going to do anything radical. I look like this guy. It's very vanilla, and I don't think that brings fans.
Yeah, so as I said, and a lot of it, you're playing a part, and people I think are afraid to play a part.
Sure.
So and I've learned as you saw if it was with David Bailey or Johnny O'Mara, Jeff Ward, Ron Lachine, Glover, or if it was Johnny Greaves, Scott Taylor. Scott Douglas, whoever it was, you race hard, but then you play. Sometimes you play the villain, sometimes you play the hero.
Sure. So
I went through a lot of my career, and I realized that Batman isn't Batman without the Joker.
Sure.
But we all want to think we're always Batman.
Yeah.
To this group of people, I'm the Joker. To this people, I'm Batman.
Short course.
Right, yeah. So
You're the bad guy
when
in
I was in
short course.
Wisconsin and I blew the wheels off of Johnny Greaves,
Yeah.
When he blew my wheels off the day before and said, "Oh, F you, Ricky Johnson," on the microphone.
Yeah.
Mistake on his part. Everything was fine. They all cheered. We're in Bark River. We're close to Green Bay.
I had my cousins from the Midwest, literally go, man, you don't like that Ricky Johnson guy, do you? And I go, yeah, actually, we're good friends. And I'm like, man, we don't like him. Like, well, this is Raiders versus the Bears.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
And at first, it hurts your feelings because no one wants to be booed. No one wants to say, "Oh, F you," blah blah blah. But I remember that. So I chased him, and it was probably the two best laps of my short course career of everything I've ever done. He was going good, but I caught him. And he got protective on one line, and I was planning the pass 2 turns ahead of time. And when I came into him, he turned back in, and we hit hard.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a door-to-door. It was door-to-door. It was like a legit deal.
Sure.
But it was last turn, so he was blocking, and I was coming in.
That's what – I mean, that rivalry between you guys, like I just remember seeing the whole thing and being a part of it. Filming and just being there for it. And it was so invigorating to the audience. They either
and polarizing.
Yeah.
You picked one or the other.
They either loved you or hated you. And I remember cause I knew both of you, but I had a longer relationship with you. And I'm like, actually Johnny's seems like a nice guy. And you see him flip out and you're like, I don't know. Right.
Yeah. Well, everyone's got their dark and dirty side.
Well, of course.
But when it comes to that, I'll never forget that. I was very proud of myself because I just chased down, I think, one of the best pro 4 racers of all time.
At that point, the best.
Yeah, right. So I'm racing him for a championship. We're going, and he hit me the day before. I hit him. I didn't go in there with the intention to smash him, but I went in there with the intention to pass him.
Sure.
And I thought that he crossed the finish line behind me, but I hit him so hard I knocked him into the wall and it broke his truck and he DNF'd.
Yeah.
Well, then his brother and his crew chief came over and they wanted a fist fight.
Yeah.
And I was at that point, there's so much adrenaline. I mean, there's you're in testosterone, you're at a peak. I'm like, let them go.
Yeah.
Let's do this, And so then they stop that. And then we're going to the podium, which we got to go right in front of the stands, which it's all Johnny Grease people.
Oh, yeah, it's all Midwest.
And so Jeff Nordstrom's there and Larry is there. And he goes, I got a rock, in his hand. And so I'm like, don't do anything. Like literally walk. They'll probably throw beer on me. They're going to scream. They're going to this and that. And even if it starts a scuffle, don't do anything unless I'm getting my ass kicked. If I'm getting my ass kicked, all bets are off. But we can't start, if we start a riot and if we show aggression, it's 900 to 1. We're going to lose. And I said, not besides that, it's just bad for everything. So I'm fine. I'll take the verbal abuse. And so I'm walking, people are going, like a biker like right in my face. I'm just like, hey, whatever, blah, blah. I'll never forget. So I get on the podium and I'm getting interviewed. And this lady's right in front of me. You guys can blur this out. And she's going,
yeah.
And so I'm watching her and we're eye to eye.
Yeah,
I'm looking at her and she's like, and I said, man, so I got the microphone. I said, ma'am, I appreciate your commitment to Johnny Grease, but I want you to take my perspective for one moment. I said, I had probably the 2 best laps of my racing career, and I was able to catch who was arguably the best Pro 4 racer of all time, and I was able to pass him, and yes, there was contact, but you're not giving me any of that credit to suck him up those last 2 laps
100%.
And do what I did. So I said, I'm fine with you flipping me off. I'm fine with that because I want you to support Johnny Grease. And she's over there like damn you. I want to hate you, but I got to respect that. And I think once racers, and this goes back to how everyone's so vanilla, once racers realize people are going to love you and hate you for the exact same thing. Yeah. The exact same thing. Matt, you have too many tattoos. Yeah. I think you're a dick. Matt, you have cool tattoos. Where'd you get them done?
Yeah.
The exact same thing.
100%.
And people are taking 2 different rides. So don't worry about when people hate you and don't take it personally.
Well, I think that comes from your experience of being comfortable in your own skin. And
Off-road race fans, the 3rd annual California 300 off-road race comes blasting back into Barstow this fall, Thursday, October 3rd through Sunday, October 6th. Don't miss your chance to see hundreds of the country's elite desert off-road racers go door to door on a brutal 300-mile desert race course and witness the exciting conclusion of the unlimited off-road racing championship season. Visit thecalifornia300.com for more information and to purchase spectating, camping, parking, and VIP tickets. The California 300 returns.
And also, going back to your motocross career, I think that, and this is a question of like, okay, cool. So you have this just immense glory, right? Like, and you were, especially here in Southern California, it's like you're probably more famous than most rock stars, right? And you get injured. It's a serious injury to your wrist.
Yep.
Career's going to go away, right? You're 26, right? And then it's like, now what do you do? What was that like?
So for me, I was fortunate. I told you about 1983 when I dislocated my hip. And so I was in St. Louis, terrible hospital. They had to put me out to pop it back in. I was dislocated for over 5 hours. And so they had me in traction. They weren't supposed to have me in traction. And they were giving me morphine out of a needle, which hurts like a son of a bitch. But then you go into your happy place. So you put up with the pain to get the good time. And but the doctor in California said, the reason I tell you this, I'll get to the point of when my career ended, is that you're done racing. So they flew me back to California. They're going to give me the dye shot to see what happened. Because remember, Bo Jackson messed up his hip and the blood supply quit, and then they had to cut his femur off and give him a fake hip. And so I got there, and I told the doctor the next morning, because we got in late the night before, and I'm getting ready to take these tests. I said, I feel pretty good, doc. I walked to the bathroom, and he lost his mind. He's like, what? Are you putting weight? I'm like, it doesn't feel that bad. He's like, you don't understand. Didn't they tell you? I'm like, tell me what? They're like, you're done racing. You're done. We're just going to find out if we need to replace your hip or not. You'll be able to walk, but you'll never be able to race professionally. And I sat in that room and cried. I was 18 years old. I'm like, my life is over. I don't want to go paint houses with my dad. I hate painting. I don't like working with my dad because he yells at me all day. I love my dad, don't get me wrong, but I didn't want to work with him. And so when I was able to come back from that injury, I really appreciated being a racer. And so I didn't take anything for granted because I knew it could have ended that day. So then now, fast forward, everything is going great. I'm winning all the championships, the Rider of the Year, Athlete of the Year, all this great stuff. But I went through a pretty dark time at the end of '86 when I did win everything. And I've heard this from actors and other athletes and stuff. When you achieve everything that you ever thought and then some, but you're still not happy, you go massively dark. Like I'm gonna have gunpowder breath dark, and that's where I was in '86. I got to a point, I was broken up with my girlfriend. My parents were having issues with drinking and fighting, and my sister was me and my sister weren't getting along and stuff. And I didn't know who cared about me or whatever. And I thought, you know what, maybe it's just better if I smoke myself. And I played Russian roulette with myself, and I visualized my mom coming to find me, and I couldn't do it. But you think, wow, that's stupid. You have everything. You have cars, boats, house, money, and championships and glory and all this stuff. And you're like, it's more than I ever anticipated, and I'm still not happy with who I am. And so making it through those things helped me with my transition when I had to walk away. When I finally had to say, I cannot do any more with my wrist, I got to walk away. It was still, I went kicking and scratching. I remember the night after my wrist fusion, they sliced me all up and down, and they had to do all that stuff. Steph took me to a fast food drive because I was really hungry, and I lost my mind. I literally had like a nervous breakdown and crying and screaming, and she's just like, what? She was young. She was 20-some years old, and now she's got this guy, this man-child that's losing his friggin' mind. So when I had to leave, I thought, everything that I was, remember I told you a while back, the dumb kid in class, and it wasn't special, but
now
could
you
ride a
go
motorcycle.
back to that.
So now I'm like the kid at school that doesn't have his motorcycle to show everybody what I can do good. Now I'm just an average guy. And so that's when I didn't panic, but I'm like, I got to get into truck racing. And I wanted to follow Robbie Gordon's path because he went from stadium trucks into a GTU, and then I think did a little Trans Am, and then went into to IndyCar and stuff like that. So I changed my energy really quick. I'm like, motocross is over. Let it go. Let's be a truck racer. And that's when I dove headfirst into the Chevy Thunder program with John Nelson and Larry Ragland, and then we brought on Jimmy Johnson. Who'd have thought? He kind of did good after a while.
Well, that's a good story too. Like that, I know about from being from El Cajon.
Yep.
This is like a legendary story, right? Is that you both tested for Cup, right? For NASCAR ride, and he got it.
Well, no, that's not how it went. So here's how it came down. So Gary Johnson, Jimmy Johnson's dad, was my mechanic when I was 10. When I met Gary and Kathy, when Kathy was pregnant with Jimmy, we were going to Speedway 117. And then Gary was like my big brother. Kathy was like my big sister. And then when Jimmy came, he was like my little brother. So I remember changing his diapers. I joked that I wiped his ass, but I did because, I had to change his diapers when I was babysitting him. And then he was my protege in moto. Then he quit, and then he came back. And so right when I was doing well in stadium trucks, he was crushing it in the ultralights. Remember with the Nature's Recipe, he had the puppy chow. Mercedes had the female, and then Rennie Iwana had the mature dog, and then it was great. Greg had the regular Nature's Recipe. Anyhow, they took one of the trucks from Danny, which wasn't my call. Danny had 2 trucks for Chevy. Then they took one to give it to John Nelson, and then they said, we had some success. They said they were going to take the other truck from Danny, which I always felt bad for that, but it wasn't my call. I was just there.
Yeah.
And because Danny was always good to me. He tested me in the truck and gave me a shot. So when we were at the LA Coliseum, and it was a Chevy event, it's our first year, and Herb Fishel's there, and he's the top dog. And so I'm grooming Jimmy. I'm like, Jimmy, this is the guy. Here's what you say. Here's what you do. Because Jimmy was, I think, 16 at the time. But he was winning everything in ultralight. And he won that night. And so he carried his trouble. I go, that's Herb Fischel. Go talk to him. And so then I was able to help Jimmy cultivate that relationship. And then we got the second truck. And so we were teammates for that last year.
Yeah.
And then he won the last race. I got second. And then I kind of went off and did a thing. He was doing desert trucks with John Nelson.
Yeah.
And then he got a deal to go with the Herzogs short course. And that's what changed it. When the Herzogs took him under the tent, I'm going to say they probably spent over $10 million on him between short course, developing the truck, ASA, and that. They did have sponsorship from Chevrolet, but Herb and Stan were just not Herb Fischel, but Stan and Randy Herzog.
Yeah.
And Bill, their father, just loved Jimmy.
Yeah.
And then they were great to me too. They gave me a lot of opportunities. So then I raced the last year for him, and that was in '98, and I won the championship in core at the time.
Yeah.
It was the very
Just
first
become core.
become core. And then that program was gone, and Jimmy won Rookie of the Year at ASA. So then I went to ASA. Then I won Rookie of the Year. Then Jimmy went into Busch Grand National, and then Jimmy got hired by Hendrick. And I told the Herzogs, I said, "All right, give me a shot at the Busch car." And they said, "You're too old." And I was in my 30s. And I'm like, I can't go etch a sketch, 20 some years of racing to start lying about my age. And that's where my career in stock cars ended, and Jimmy took off.
Yeah.
And I don't say that bitterly. I mean, I love Jimmy like a little brother, and I'm so proud of everything he's done.
I remember that era too. It was another win for the El Cajon shit kids.
Absolutely.
Because being a kid from El Cajon at that point in my life, I'm like, it was rad, but it was also man, you're going to have to do some remarkable things not to end up being a construction worker like everybody else was in El Cajon. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No.
But my uncle was in concrete. My brother and I worked doing concrete for, multiple summers, and it was hard work. It's one of the reasons why I went to college. I mean, I'll be totally honest with you, is I'm looking at guys in their 30s who look like they're 70, because of how many hours and being in the sun and just how brutal it was. But yet you had these guys like you and Jimmy and then other bike athletes and stuff who had come from El Cajon and become really big stars, right? And Jimmy was, obviously a big illustration of it with his success in NASCAR.
Well, that was the thing. You're absolutely right. Where I grew up in El Cajon in the late 60s, early 70s, everybody was a tradesman. I mean, we had a house that I think it cost my parents $30,000, and we lived right next to the school. And everybody I knew, their dad was a bricklayer. My dad was a painter. Brock Glover's dad was an electrician, and my uncle was a plumber, and so everybody I knew, they were tradesmen because they couldn't afford to live in Point Loma or La Jolla or that, so they went east, and so then El Cajon was this new area of suburbia.
It really was the blue collar zone of California, and then when you look at what it spawned with off road, right? It's incredible. I mean, again, now us being the age that we are, it's easy for me to look at things like the Raptor and go that's from El Cajon. Mm-hmm. I was sitting down with Craig Stewart, and he literally told me the story about him first calling his dad's truck that he was practicing in a pre-runner. Right. And I'm like, what year was that? He's like, oh, I think it was 84. I'm like, you invented the pre-runner.
Right.
You know what I mean? He's like, yeah, I guess I did. Right. It's it's just realizing all the things that came from, El Cajon.
I go by Fox to get my shocks.
Yeah.
For the for the truck that Lucas Cassidy is driving, and our son Luke is building, and every time I go by Chineth, I get goosebumps.
Yeah.
It was this little. It's still there. I think it's a plumber. Shop now or whatever. But the history that went through there, the stuff that they built, Mike Thomas for the Navy SEALs, and the Ryan Thomas winning the Baja 1000 in a single seat car, and just there's so much heritage there. Then you had Jackman shocks, then Deutsche Tech, and then you had Jackman wheels. You had just all of these crazy things that came from right in El Cajon, especially that northeast corridor.
Yeah.
And that's where ORW started and all these crazy things. Johnson's Bug Machine, I mean, that was, everybody went there. Everyone knew Big Jim Johnson and Steve Johnson and Shirley and the other Rick and that. It was just such a cool time because there was off-road cars everywhere. There was motorcycles everywhere. There was Santee sand pits, Lakeside sand pits.
But the energy too, like I just remember being a kid and just being like, every weekend, like what's happening this weekend?
Right.
And it was like having Christmas every weekend. Every weekend it was like, we're going to Glamis.
Yeah.
I'm a kid from Michigan and I'm like, what the hell is that?
Yeah.
We're going to Mickey Thompson. What's that? We're going to Baja. I remember the first time I went to Baja. I'm pretty sure my parents didn't know that it was another country. They're like, yeah, that's down by South El Cajon.
Yeah,
okay.
exactly.
All right, we'll see you in a couple of days. You know what I mean? It was like not like, oh, do you have a passport or anything? It was like
a little different back then.
Yeah, climb in the back of the truck and hold the cooler closed.
But if you think about it, Cajon Speedway, Barona Oaks, South Bay Speedway, which ran sprint cars, flat track, motocross, all of that, and then you went up a little bit up the highway, Saddleback, Escape Country, Riverside. Ascot, and Corona. There was Paris. Lake Elsinore had a track. Dehesa had a track out on. So it was, like I said, a lot of that was spurred from On Any Sunday.
Yeah.
But also, if you remember, On Any Sunday shows Malcolm Smith in a car too.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just the motorcycle influence, but like, oh my God, there's these buggies that race through Mexico, and then there's obviously the Mint 400, and now there's all these James Garner and all this stuff, and so but that all started, I'm not going to say it absolutely started in El Cajon because there was guys everywhere, but I'm going to say that's where it blew up. That's where it blew up. Yeah.
No, that was 100% the nucleus of it. It's funny because I didn't realize it. I was having a conversation with Brian Chichua, who is Off-Road Motorsports Hall of Famer and really, was big in promoting Jeeps and Jeep racing. And he was explaining to me, like, a lot of like, why does it happen? Why does all this happen in Southern California? He's like, well, the weather. I'm like, sure, the weather, that helps. But like you had this confluence of hot rodders and post World War II, but in addition to the hot rodders, there was all these, people doing that were aerospace engineers. So when you get a guy like that who basically has just a crazy mind for, building stuff, and what are they going to do in their free time? They're going to build badass stuff, and then their buddy sees it and goes, oh, well, yeah, if we put this engine in it, we can do this. And it just was an incredible time and really an incredible place, for all that to transpire and happen. And it's funny now, because I've been fortunate to have these experiences. And one that I talk about was Killian and I were in China, and we're in Inner Mongolia, and that's not even the big dunes. We were in what they were calling the smaller dunes, which were still 300 miles long. And these guys come rolling up to us, and they have these hand-built cars, and it looks like pipe fencing, and but they're mimicking our style, right? And they have they had a monster logo that they cut out and was sideways, and it was like kind of their interpretation. And in a country that technically isn't supposed to see what we're doing, like that's being restricted, and they still do that. It was pretty incredible. It just reminded me of the power of culture, of our culture, and the effect that it had on the world. So,
well, and for me, taking that, how did that affect me? Down the street, so I lived here on Wichita. I would go down to the end of the hill, or turn left. I'd go to the end of the block, which is right next to the elementary school that I went to. Bill Silverthorne lived there, factory Honda rider, and he was the one, the old SL 400 or 500 or something, jumping across the dune.
Yeah.
I would go there every day and act like put on a different shirt and ask him for another poster.
Yeah.
Get another poster and watch him work on his bike, because it was a lot like watching Mert Lawwell from On Any Sunday, and track home with his 2-car garage and got his motorcycles and all the different stuff. Then down the road was that's where Jim Johnson, Steve Johnson's dad, started Johnson's Bug Machine, is right in their garage.
Yeah.
I remember I had a solvent tank there, build motors, and he started with Corvairs and things like that, and then started doing VWs, and so you had all these influences. And then I have Murray Hoffman, who was the first motocross, I'm going to say superstar out of El Cajon. He rode flat track, he did motocross, he did road racing, he did everything. He was just unbelievable. And so we ended up becoming friends with him, and he taught me a lot how to race. Then all of a sudden, here comes Marty Smith and Marty Tripes and Marty Moats and Tommy Croft, and then Brock Glover comes onto the scene. And so for me, I was kind of destined to do what I did, because, and then
You were surrounded by it.
right. And then now here comes Ivan Stewart.
Yeah.
So Ivan Stewart was, I think, a bricklayer, right? Wasn't he?
Fence builder.
Yeah, fence builder.
Yeah.
Look at his hands. I mean, just he's a man's man.
Yeah.
And so when you're able to touch your heroes, like see Ivan Stewart and talk to him and listen to him tell a joke and listen to him laugh and all that, you're going, they're just humans. I want to be them.
It supercharges you.
Yeah. Well, you realize that if you keep your shit together, it's attainable.
Yeah.
Like that, because you look at him, you go, this guy's a fence builder, and Silverthorne did this, and so did that. You realize that if I focus and really put my attention towards it, I could do that. So that's kind of the attitude that I've had. I'm 60 years old and still swinging at it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's pretty remarkable. Let's talk about your sons for a second. Like, especially Luke, like, I think every parent would like their kids to like the things that they love, right?
Yeah.
That's always a good thing. And then there's this, like, it's interesting. Then there's this funny thing of, like, you're like, okay, he likes it, but is he going to be any good at it, right?
Right.
Because you're Ricky Johnson's son. Unfortunately for you, Luke turned out to be a badass, right?
Right.
Both as a driver, as a mechanic, but also, like, the thing that I've seen is he also picked up your skill for teaching.
Yeah.
Like, what's that like for you to have him, take on your passion?
So let's break them down to the three. There's Lucas, our oldest, Jake is the middle, and Cassidy, our daughter, is the youngest. And Luke wanted to be me. He not because I was a superstar, but he liked the style. He liked motorcycles. Sure. He liked driving. He liked that. His attention span. He was cut from the same cloth as me. Jake, I feel very intelligent, unbelievable with ball sports. Great rider. I mean, he could get on a motorcycle and go race what they call day in the dirt, run 5 motors and not even get a blister. Just silky smooth. But he didn't like the celebrity. Like, when he was a little kid, people would come up to me. He would sit and look at him like, why are you being nice to my dad? We don't know you.
Yeah.
And then there's Cassidy, who lies somewhere in between of, like, she'll we call him Factory Phil a little bit.
Yeah.
And, like, she'll take the benefits when she can, but she does resist it, and she wants to be her own person. And so now she's running sports marketing at the 395.
Yeah.
And not sports marketing, but all the marketing for that. And she's learning the business when it comes to the motorcycle side. Jake went to school, played lacrosse, won a championship, and went at CSU, and now is in construction management and engaged. And he likes to have everything in place. Luke, like I said, works with me with the military, but he went to Fab School, Troy Johnson's Fab School, which was unbelievable, because we realized that Luke is a little bit more like me. Like, he's not a 4-year or 8-year degree guy. It just, his brain doesn't work like that. But now at his age, I know he's very intelligent because he can put things together, and his idea
build a race truck.
Yeah, build a race car. That you gotta have an unbelievable artistic mind. So it's good, and he's also a very, very caring person. Like, when it comes to teaching, if we're teaching killers, the top of the top SF guys, Special Forces guys in Navy, Air Force, at MARSOC, in Army, he's stern with them, but he cares.
Yeah.
And so he identifies with them, because most of the guys are his age, and now some of them are even younger.
Yeah.
So they identify with him sometimes better than me, which I'm fine. If you learn it, I'm okay with you learn it from him or you learn it from me.
Right. But what's that make you feel like, with your relationship with him in particular?
It's great. I mean, what's cool is that I work with my daughter now, because I'm the spokesman for 395 Motorsports. So we talk on business. And so it's not every call is this big dramatic thing, or we have to look for something to talk about, I can call him and go, okay, we need to do that. We need to get my travel up there to be ready to do this show. Let's book a adventure bike ride or whatever it is. It's really quick. Then with Jake is sort of on his own, doing his own thing, but I still talk with him and I love him to death. But he's taking his own path. And then there's Luke, which I talk to every day. And I love this. If I had my way right now, I would have a business where I work with all three, or I would have 3 businesses for all 3 kids if they couldn't stand each other. But I love having that casual exchange, that there's not the pressure of, well, I got to say I love you and we got to do this. No, it's like just interacting is great. And so for me, I mean, as you said, I remember people have said, the son's never as good as the dad. And I think Luke is faster than me in the desert. He's definitely faster than me at night because his eyes are better, and he very smooth, very quick. He had a couple bad breaks, running for Mike Walser, and he crashed and the steering got messed up. Who doesn't crash?
Yeah,
what I mean? But in today, if you crash today, you're fired tomorrow. And I'm not poo-pooing Mike Walser at all, but it's that way with if you're a fill-in driver, your job is not to break shit. So, but I've tested with him, I've worked with him, and so when we talk, same thing. I love listening to him. So when I have my coach is Luke, so he rides with me. He's coaching me what I'm doing. Oh, you're kind of shuffling your hands. You're kind of doing this. You're kind of off on that berm a little bit. Or when I race, he spots for me, and he can coach me, and I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
Because he's seeing things that I'm maybe not feeling or I'm not doing. So to have that kind of relationship with your son, that I allow him to tell me no, and I tell him no, but we do not disrespect each other.
Sure.
Like that's a dumb effing idea or blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
We disagree a lot. Honestly, we do. But there's not the disrespect, because either I'll punch him in the head and now he's bigger, he'll punch me in the head.
Right.
So I say that I've never been physical with my kids. I've spanked them with the belt and things like that, but I've never beat them and I've never hit them with a fist or anything like that. But the point is, it's about respect, and I respect him. He respects me, and that's the biggest thing. Why I enjoy working with my kids is because you got to give them the ability to say no. Because a lot of times, especially when it comes to building the car, Luke is right and I'm wrong. So, but we still have this battle. I may be a little stronger in this area, stronger in that, but I still every now and then go, well, what if we put this here and make that there? Blah blah. I still have my wacky ideas every now and then.
He picked up your ability to teach as well, which, I've been around a lot of, teachers in motocross and martial arts and whatnot. And you are one of the best, if not the best teacher for off-road that I've ever seen. Right.
Thank you.
Where do you think that comes from?
Caring and also, as I said, Luke is like me in the sense that he has to feel it. If he sees it, he can feel it, and then he can do it. And then being around it, you learn. And also when you see the world in pictures, sometimes you can interpret things better than other people.
Sure.
Like I can interpret a feeling. And so when I had to work with Japanese, I had to be very, very short. My wife makes fun of me because if I'm with Italians, I have an Italian accent, and I'm with the Japanese, I have a Japanese accent.
Right.
But you've got to make your statement simple and to the point. And I've said this before, when I was with the Japanese companies, they would come in and they would always ask you, what's your first impression? And then so you go. And then you tell them your first impression. And then you tell them this big, long story, and then you come right back to what your first impression was. And so with the teaching, Luke listens to what I say, then he takes his own. Because I'll be honest, this started a long time ago. When he was 4 years old on his little Honda, 50, he's got his buddies, and I'm over there doing something on the boat dock in North Carolina. I hear him talking about where to put their foot out and how to enter the corner and this, that. And I'm thinking, shit, he's listening. Like he's teaching another 5-year-old kid almost word for word what I, at 28 years old, am teaching.
Right.
So then I took him to a couple of special forces schools, and he was still 15 and riding a 450, and they're on 250s. And so they immediately had respect for him. But then he's over there, and I'm like, oh, go work with him on that. And then they would do it, and he just picked it up, and he has the ability to communicate. The thing is, he gets a little too wordy. So my big comment with him is, Luke, 10 words or less. Just don't fix everything, which I know that's what you want to do. But this is when, I can refer back to you in martial arts.
Retention.
Give me one thing to fix. Okay, now that's fixed. Now let's go to 2. Let's go to 3. Let's go to 4. A flying arm bar is a lot more than an arm bar.
Yeah, it's a lot more. That's the thing is, like, we were talking earlier, and like what drives me crazy about, and I love watching, MMA matches now, UFC in particular, and a lot of friends that fight. But when I see them fail on like the basics, I'm like, oh man, that's jiu-jitsu 101. That's like the third thing that we drill into your head,
right? Of
either, whatever, how to escape, how to finish, etc. And when they fail at that, I'm like, okay, there it is. There's a retention thing. But, with teaching, I mean, a lot of people don't know how big your teaching repertoire was. Like, you're not just teaching people how to, recreationally drive off-road. You're teaching racers how to get better. You've done a lot of military training with the upper end of the, special forces guys. I mean, I remember me and Vinny were out doing a photo shoot. We got stuck, and I'm like, we're kind of screwed, right? And then you come bopping by going, what are you doing, right? And I'm like, well, currently I'm being stuck. I'm being a victim, and you guys dragged us out of there. But, without getting too far off, like the guys you were with were very important, military team.
Yes, the best of the best.
And it was like one of those things where it's like, we have a lot of military friends, and a lot of them are at different levels in the military, but it's like, it was really cool because there's this moment where I'm like, oh no, these are the real guys.
Right.
And this is, you training them in how to operate off-road, in these, extremely, not just difficult, but extremely important combat situations for, our country and the world.
Well, and that's when I first started, I think everybody tries to teach what they're good at. Like, I remember they had O'Neill for rally.
Yep.
And then I was back there teaching them motocross and motorcycles, and I kind of taught them how to motocross, taught them how to jump, taught them how to corner, how to do a start and all this stuff. And I'm like, they don't need to understand that. No. And so then what I started doing was basically teaching them how to pre-run.
Yeah.
You talk about Craig Stewart's, what he called it, is when you pre-run, you got to save your stuff. You want to get as much pre-running done as you can in one day without tearing up your equipment. You have one spare tire. You don't want to get flat because now you have no spare tires. You don't want to break your car and blah, 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 blah. So if I can teach these guys to cross ground quickly, keep their sound footprint down, so they're not going wah, 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 wah. So because most of the time they're operating in nods. Well, guess what? Stevie Wonder goes, they're right over there.
Yeah.
I can hear them.
Yeah.
So start shooting that direction. So you keep the sound level down. Also keeps the temperatures down. So when the nods see them, they don't see these glowing pipes because it picks up the thermal. Then also when to say no. That's the biggest thing that I've taught with these guys is when to walk away. Because if you get into a gunfight, I'm not getting in gunfights. If they get into a gunfight, there's a chance that they die, unless it's a mass on mass. But if you're in a car and you're driving and you're a 5-team element, you got two other guys in the front, 3 guys in the back, and this and that, you flip the car. What have you done?
Yeah, you've killed some guys in the back.
But you've disabled your vehicle to get out of there. Yeah. You're more than likely you're going to hurt somebody because these things aren't built for comfort, and we don't have helmets and neck braces and all that stuff on. So you really have to take care of yourself. And so once again, the way I go pre-run a lot of times is just Victor and I and my side-by-side, my players Turbo R cruising along, and nobody's there to help me.
Yeah.
I mean, if have to, I could call Gus on a sat phone and this and that, but still, no, it's going to be a long time before someone comes to get me. So I try to teach these guys, take care of yourself. Yeah. Really, self-preservation is huge. And the other thing is that what I enjoy about it is that I'll never forget this. We were at a place called Wide Open down, and I was working with my partner, Jeff Benrud. And these guys, I'm showing this little tabletop. and they're going. And so then all right, guys, go out and you got about 10 minutes to just go ride and do the jumps. And we're not going nuts. Just go ride. Learn what you were just taught. And they come back and I wave them in. Nobody crashed. We're all good. And I'm just listening to them. And they're like, dude, did you see it? I would hit that jump and I was doing this and doing that. And these guys have been through some of the gnarliest gunfights and battles in history. I mean, that generation of soldier between Iraq, Afghanistan, all of the different stuff and everything that was going on, 9/11 and all that crazy stuff. These guys have seen, for soldiers, they've seen more war than anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody. They went from war to war to war to war to war. They're busy, busy, busy. So they've seen a lot of dark shit. And I'm listening to them, and they're like a little kid. I mean, they're like me when I was 8 years old. Dude, did you see me do that jump on a blah, 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 blah? So I've had this terminology that motorcycles and off-road cars and stuff make a little boy feel like a man, and they make an old man feel like a little boy. And there's not a lot of things to do that. You know, jiu-jitsu doesn't. I feel old.
Yeah.
I get beat up faster and quicker than I did when I was young. And even surfing, paddling out, it kicks your ass. But if I want to get on my motorcycle and ride at this age, if I want to go on an adventure bike, you know, if I'm on, you know, BMW cruising down the road and just feeling the temperature change, smelling the flowers, and doing all the different stuff, I'm enjoying myself at that age. And so it makes me feel like I'm a little kid again. So That's what's cool about my job. A long answer here, but is I get to share what I've spent my life doing and what's afforded me to do a lot of cool things with the guys that are on the front lines. And because we're in America, we live in a free country, they fight so we can have those liberties.
You know, I kind of know this answer because of our relationship and like how you're, you know, like I call you to ask you questions, right? Because that's one thing I really enjoy about not just our relationship, but about being in this culture is like I have these people that are incredibly intelligent and that have incredible life experiences. And it's like, to me, it's like an encyclopedia. I go, suspension, I need to call Tommy.
Right.
You know, car builds, I need to call Savage, or I need to call, you know, Mason and talk to him about this. And so I feel incredibly fortunate. But, you know, at this point, you know, with all the things that you've accomplished in your career, what do you feel like you have left to do?
And I hate the word, Cameron uses it, but share the stoke. Like that is a cringy word that I don't like, but it says everything. When you're stoked about going surfing, if you're stoked about going riding, is you're excited. So you're sharing the excitement. But in SoCal, especially San Clemente, you're sharing the stoke.
You spread the gospel.
Exactly.
Right? That's the Southern way.
There you go. Is get people to enjoy. We're here for a short amount of time.
Yeah.
I mean, I realize it now. I'm 60 years old. I'm like, son of a bitch. You know, if they say if I live to 80, that's 20 summers. I mean, that's if I do good.
Right.
Right. So my thing is, I want to be around people that I love. I want to eat dinner with my wife. I want to pet my dogs. I want to love my kids. I want to be around my friends. But you know what? If it's like goes back to that fishing story about the billionaire and the fisherman in Mexico and this and that. If I had, if I won the lotto, I would ride more adventure bikes and race trophy trucks and have more fun with my family.
Yeah.
What am I doing? I race for Gus Villadosla. I'm building an adventure business, and I'm still married after 34 years.
Yeah.
And my kids, I think they like me. You know, they call me and they say hello. So I'm winning. Now, does my bank book say that? No, but my life experiences do. So what I want to do at this age is get guys that are in a rut. You know, they've retired. Now you've worked so damn hard. You got money. Let's go do some stuff. And that doesn't have to be, you know, the Ayresburg rally and all this stuff, but get out on a motorcycle and do something for you. And because if you're a better man, you're going to be a better husband and a better father and a better friend and a better, you know, all these different things, grandfather, whatever it might be. So I want to share my ability to teach so that they're safe, so they feel competent doing it. Because a lot of the guys that get adventure bikes, they have street tires and they never touch dirt. Well, there's a lot more adventure when you can go across a dirt road.
Yep.
Now, granted, you don't need to go climb Glamis in the sand with an adventure bike and saddlebags. That's not cool because it's not going to, you know.
It's not going to be fun.
We're not Ricky Brayback. So let it go. Let it go. But if I can share people with that, through schools, through tours, and create relationships. Because I did my one tour last year for Anaheim, and we called it Lucky 13.
I saw that.
And I still have a group called Lucky 13 where I have, Nikki from Wales and Mike from El Centro and Ed from, Ed Jager from LA and blah, blah, blah. And we're all just busting each other's balls, something stupid, making fun of Mike, Mike Hardaway, because it's 140 degrees in Arizona. I'm like, that's why you're so damn rich. You're smart. You put an HVAC in El Centro company, or make fun of Nikki because it rains all the time in Wales, things like that. So you're making friends. And then I've found, I have this tattoo on my arm that has a cross, a Celtic cross, and a lot of the guys call it the Heavens Devils. Mike Johnson, Brent Fletcher, Jager, Franco, Mouse McCoy, Craig Hunter. There's a whole group of us. Dave, Mason, Kenny. So I'm going to forget a couple of them, but anyways, it's all of us that grew up riding together. And so when I did mine, my cross is my faith in Christ. There's a halo is my little bit of goodness. The flames that come through it is my desire. And the motorcycle tire, which is the circle and the Celtic knot, touches all aspects of my life, because I have friends that I rode mini bikes with, and when we talk, we go right back to where we were. Something about motorized vehicles and dudes, if you have that as the catalyst between you, it seems to last forever. And there are those bitchy guys that need a good slapping, but majority of the time, the guys that are down in Mexico, if they're stuck, you help them. Like if it's Rolf and Rick Johnson, we're always helping each other out, whatever it might be. Even though on Saturday, I'm trying to kick their ass, they're trying to kick my ass. Yeah. And so that goes the same with everybody else. Now Rossler and Clay Lawrence are they're right there all the time, and Damon Bradshaw. So the point is, we're all there for each other, but we want to kick each other's ass too. So that's where I'm at. I want to race, I want to have fun, and I want to stay married and enjoy maybe my last 20 summers, if I'm lucky.
Well, that's a good plan. I hope to be a part of every single one of those 20 summers. That was awesome, brother. Thank you.
Always a pleasure, brother. And let's get out and have some fun. We have some time left.
Let's do it.
All right.
All right.